So I'm delighted to be joined by Anne-Marie Kennedy on the show today. She has extensive experience working as a sports psychologist across a wide variety of elite sports in Ireland. So firstly, thanks for coming on, Anne-Marie. I know you're probably busy enough. We're in the middle of the summer now. Do you tend to be fairly flat out at this time of year?
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, it's great to be on. Yes, absolutely flat out. Up and down the country. You will not catch me in Kildare for the next couple of weeks. So yeah, it is very busy. Very busy with clubs at the moment.
Yeah, so we were just chatting before we started recording. So you were saying you've kind of taken a step back, maybe from working with I guess the elite teams in GA on the men's side of things at the moment. So you have a good few club teams on your hands that you're dealing with.
Yeah, yeah, I did. I took just a little step back for a break because the inter-county setup I've been in it year on year for about 10 years. It is quite intense. And we do need a break sometimes. So I did. I took a small step back and decided to take on maybe some smaller roles that didn't require too much traveling and things like that. So yes, had a couple of women's teams throughout the season and focusing a lot now on the club championship, which is approaching.
Mm, yeah, and like I know Dublin footballers would have been probably the first team where people would have became aware of you working as a sports psychologist. Is there any other GA teams you've been involved with since then, at a county level?
Yeah, yeah, I've been you could have found me in any county, Kevin. I didn't do a whole lot of GA after the Dublin my time in Dublin because I felt very loyal, and I kind of waited to get back into football until most of the lads had kind of retired and things like that because we'd spent an awful long time together, and it does kind of become family. But I did a year or two, a year and a bit in the Clare senior hurlers, so under Brian Lohan.
Yeah.
Um, really enjoyed that. I'm a tip woman actually. So it was nice. It was nice to get down the country and do. I think we did some really good work there. We I think we built a really good foundation for the team. And they went on to achieve a lot of success. And I'd still back them kind of today.
Mm.
I did some work for the Kildare football team, Wexford Camogie, Kilkenny Camogie. I've just 24 and 25, 2 years with Porrick Joyce with the Galway footballers. Um, so yeah, lots of different bits and bobs.
Mm. And in terms of the other codes, then, like I might have missed a few here. So you've done Cricket Ireland, Cycling
Mm,
Ireland,
mm.
Swim Ireland, Golf Ireland, and Horse
Yeah,
Sport Ireland, to name but a
everything
few. So
Ireland.
yeah.
Yes, I have been very fortunate, very lucky in my career. I first started off in golf, would you believe? That was my very first sport. And it was, I think I got a call. It was a call from Jim Gavin around 2012 that got me into Gaelic football. But doors open. I've been very lucky. I suppose the Dublin football team has opened a lot of doors for me. My golf work helped get me into cricket. The performance director reached out. They were looking for elite sports psychologists for their national squad, so the men and the women's, and also their development and academy players. And they were looking for somebody. Obviously, we're not a huge cricket nation, so there wasn't a whole lot of people that were working in the space that kind of understood cricket. So they were looking for somebody similar. So the golf kind of matched some of the demands and the logistics of multi-day tournaments and lots of international travel and things like that. So came on board, ended up with Cricket Ireland for about 6 years. um that really, I absolutely loved it. I grew to love the game. It does take a long time to figure it out and do all the maths and stuff, but I loved, yeah, it was a really good game. So I worked across all the formats, different environments, um, different countries, seen the world from Guyana to the West Indies, a couple of tours to South Africa, Zimbabwe, Pakistan, places that you'd never see. I think from a professional development point of view, I think that's where I really began to learn my trade because you're right in the thick of it. You are completely embedded. You're on tour, it could be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks at a time. You're working within the multidisciplinary team. So you're working with the coaches, you're working with the medical staff, you're working with the S&C. And it's just, yeah, your skills, you learn your trade. You really do. You learn your trade there. Um, so I only finished up with cricket about 2 or 3 years ago. I think the demands of the travel and the tours just became too much. My kids were beginning to kind of realize that I was gone for long periods of time, whereas when they were younger, they didn't really have a concept of time, so it was easier. I will leave the touring now to the younger people. They're well able for it, Kevin. Um, so then I had some contracts with the Sport Ireland Institute and the Cycling Ireland, their track cycling team. They were looking for sports psychology support. Gosh, I think it was around 2018, and they were based in Mallorca at the time, obviously because we don't have a velodrome here. So I was traveling out and back to their training center in Palma. So I took them through their national championships, European championships, world championships, and onto their Olympic qualification for Tokyo at the time. And it was a really successful period for Irish cycling back then. I think the track or the cycling team had I think they had qualified the biggest cycling team into the Olympics, and we also the program medaled at the World Championships, so getting bronze and silver at the time. So that was really successful period for cycling Ireland. Loved track cycling. Cannot wait for the velodrome to be in Dublin, and I always tell any athletes or teams I'm working with, get out and watch track cycling. It's just so exciting. Um, so yeah, 6, 7 years as well with Swim Ireland, delivering sports psychology for their Leinster regional programs. Lots of other NGBs, Karate Ireland have recently done a bit of work with the national volleyball team. So yeah, like lots of different sports, and kind of Gaelic games always kind of in and around all of that as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting, just the wide range of sports.
Yeah.
I'd imagine, athletes are probably slightly different in all of them, and then in other ways they're very similar as well. But I wanted to take you back. I was just doing a bit of research there, and I think just looking at your career, like you worked in finance initially for about 10 years, and then you went into more the yoga side of things, and then eventually found your way into sports psychology. Do you want to just bring us through that sort of journey quickly, and then kind of tell us a story
That
about how you?
journey's not quick, Kevin.
Yeah.
That is a long, that is a long, winding journey. And I suppose, listen, anybody that's kind of asked how did you end up where you were? It's never simple and it's never easy. And I think, doors do open and opportunities do come. And I think it's a case of kind of going for it, whether, you know, I think sometimes you don't even have the plan. But yeah, I did my leaving cert in the mid 90s, making me very old. And they were just pushing everybody into finance at the time. So that's where I kind of ended up. So I was doing my training to be an accountant. I worked in the public service for a while. Um, but I always knew that, I grew up in a military family. My father served in the Irish Defence Forces and did a couple of tours of duty to Lebanon with the UN. We were brought up with a very strong sense of discipline, responsibility, and service to others. And, both my parents would have instilled a lot of, I suppose, values in caring for the vulnerable. So I think it was only a matter of time before I found what I was actually meant to do. Thankfully, I can't imagine being an accountant 20, 30 years on. But so at that point I went back and I did an honours degree in psychology, and I have to say I loved every single second of it. It was something like 36, 38 modules across every element of psychology. There was psychoanalysis, we studied Freud, we studied Jacques Lacan, we did maths, we did stats, everything. I just loved it. And initially, I was going to go down the clinical psychology route. And I was aware that it was very competitive at the time, and the programs in Trinity and UCD were only taking like 5, 10 people every year, so it was really competitive. But again, destiny gets in the way. I ended up needing a serious back surgery just before I graduated with my degree, and had to rehab that for about 6 to 9 months. And that's when I found yoga. That's when I started going to yoga to obviously strengthen my back and strengthen my core. And again, I just fell absolutely madly in love with the practice and couldn't get enough of it. I was practicing every single day. I was studying it, I was researching it, and I ended up finishing my degree and doing my thesis on yoga as an intervention for reducing perceived stress and increasing general health and well-being. Um, and then I I went and I did yoga teacher training. So I trained all over the world and ended up training in Arizona with for yoga for golfers, and I opened two yoga businesses: Yoga for Golf Ireland and Sports Yoga Ireland. So it was while I was kind of teaching yoga. Obviously, I was in and out golf clubs up and down the country. I was in and out GA clubs. People were really taking it on board. They were really buying in. They loved what yoga was giving them because it was both physical and mental. And I started joining the dots, and I was like, hold on, there's something here. There's something between the psychology and the ancient teachings of yoga, the pranayama, the breath work, the emotional regulation, the attentional control, the ability to be able to, I suppose, yoga is about creating stress in the body and forcing us to be able to deal with that and cope with that. So started joining the dots, and I went, hold on, there's definitely something here. And I started looking at sports psychology, and found the accredited course up in Ulster University in Belfast. So enrolled in that. Again, loved it. Was still piecing it all together, and realized that, yeah, I wasn't going to go down clinical. I felt like, okay, we can work with athletes. Athletes also need lots of help, and we can do that. So yeah, I started working obviously with Dublin. Was thrown into the deep end there. That was a baptism of fire, because I was actually doing my master's at the time when Jim brought me in. So yeah, kind of learning on the ground the hard way, and then I went on and completed my training over in the UK, which was, I suppose, the icing on the cake. It was for 5 years, 5 years supervised training that got me my chartership and my HCPC registration. So yeah, here I am today.
Yeah, it's interesting. It kind of reminds me of, I don't know if you ever heard the Steve Jobs speech he gave for about joining the dots. You can only join them looking backwards, and you see,
Yeah,
you obviously follow an interest and then
yeah,
something else. You see the yoga. And I think was it the yoga initially that Martin Kennedy asked you to come in and help out
yeah,
with Dublin, first of all, and then
yeah.
Jim probably seen you were studying.
Mm,
But I was reading before about you would have helped develop what you termed as the mindful athlete program when you
yeah.
went in with Dublin.
Mm,
And I guess it was probably just to help players, to cope and to perform at a really high level.
mm.
Can you give us kind of an insight into that? What was the ideas behind it, or do you have much memories of what
Yeah,
actually entailed?
yeah. It was really fascinating because I think, and again, looking back now, I mean, we're talking about 12 years ago, 12, 13 years ago now, which is hard to believe. But when you think that some of the practices that the Dubs were doing back then, teams are still not doing
Mm.
10, 15 years on. So Jim was definitely ahead of his time. And, I remember I used to, and I've probably spoken about this on other podcasts, but I think I had the midnight shift for Jim's correspondence. So I used to get, so he'd have his schedule on a 15-minute kind of rota, and I got the midnight to 12:15. But I used to get emails where he'd be throwing me research and papers, and he was like, "What do you think about this? And can we do this?" And I was like, "Oh my God, this man is amazing. Yes, we could do all of that. Let's do it." So we sat down, and we obviously, coming from my work So the yoga started off with them as kind of like a physical recovery piece that Martin was looking for in terms of his athletic development. But I was teaching the breath work, I was teaching the regulation. We were beginning to kind of do some visualization and some really structured imagery within the practice as well. So we sat down and we said, right, how can we? And the thing about gym was that you had to do your time. So you like I served my time. You had to build up the trust, you had to build up the rapport, and then the role kind of evolved because he was like, okay, I can trust you. Let's see what we can do together. So we sat down and we said, right, we decided we would use kind of mindfulness and meditation as the vehicle to train a lot of the psychological skills that we wanted the players to develop. So we're talking about, first of all, the awareness. Jim wanted them to be super aware of themselves because you can't regulate what you don't know. So we wanted them to be able to recognize when their physiology would change, when they became stressed, when so that they were able to recognize when they were under pressure. Because it's only until then can you start to put the strategies in place. So that was the first thing. Um, the concentration and the focus. So we talk about concentration. Probably for me is probably the most important mental skill because everything comes down to that. It's your ability to stay on task no matter kind of what's going on around. So how do you train concentration? How can we get really good at concentration? And we used to do that through the meditation. And this wasn't meditation like you'd see on YouTube, Kevin, or this was like we specifically developed our own scripts depending on what we wanted to teach. And the boys would have to spend X amount of time every day or every week training these skills. So it was about creating a self-awareness. It was about them becoming mindful of their attention, their thoughts, how that felt in their body, being able to regulate. And then we layered it with the superpowers of imagery and visualization in terms of we would look at the demands of the sport and we would say, okay, well, if these are the demands, how can we develop imagery scripts and some visualization for them to be able to see themselves going through these things and doing them not perfectly, because sport isn't perfect, performances aren't perfect, but realistically, what are we likely to face, and how can we visualize ourselves facing those challenges and overcoming them and being able to execute our skills brilliantly. So it was a performance under pressure piece plus all the cognitive skills attached to it. Um, and yeah, he was all over it. He was all over it.
Yeah, because I remember being at a lot of those games, and especially the big games, the All Ireland finals during that period.
Yeah.
There was a lot of those games Dublin won by 1 point, and they were right
Yeah.
in the medal pot coming down to the
Mm.
last few minutes. So it says a lot about the mental strength of that team that they were
Yeah.
just. You almost had a sense that when it came to those few minutes, Dublin probably just about get over the line because they had developed that over a couple of years. They just looked like a
Yeah.
team. If the game was in the medal pot, they would
Mm.
win the game.
Yeah, and that's really that's what it's about, and that wasn't just down to the mindful athlete program. That was down to the caliber of coaches. It was the strength of their game plan, their tactics. Um, it's everything that comes together. We looked at it like this. These are all pieces of the performance puzzle. Jim was the great conductor. And it's really hard. Success is really hard because all of these things have to come together at the same time. But there was a belief that the game plan was strong enough, the talents of the players were strong enough. We had good people in the back room. We all had a shared vision. It was a team first mentality, so you would do anything for the team. And Jim was um, very open about that. It was what's best for Dublin football, not what's best for any one person, whether that was in the back room or whether that was a player. It was Dublin first. Um, so I think it was the combination of lots of really high caliber ingredients going into the pie that got us over the line um, in some of those All Ireland finals where there was only a point in it.
One thing I'm curious about, I was reading quotes from John Kiley, the Limerick hurling manager recently. He was talking about
Mm,
Caroline Curd, and
mm,
the sense you kind of get from those quotes was that she was almost kind of working with him as much as the players. She was sort of helping him with how you
mm.
talk to the players. Was that similar with Jim? Would he be asking you a lot about how his dealings with players, or was he different in that sense?
Not necessarily those kind of conversations, but it would be definitely more performance based, you know. I think the role of the psychologist can be completely different depending on what the demands of the team is, the development of the team, what the manager is looking for. And I suppose Caroline Currid's work has put sports psychology out there, and she has done a huge amount for the profession. But everybody's remit is different. But there definitely are times where I have gone into a setup, and you have been a very close confidant with the manager and the backroom team in terms of how do we shape the environment here? How do we shape the culture to get the best out of the players? And I'd often have provided advice on speaking to the media, how to deal with conversations around selection, lots of things like that. How to talk to players about role clarity, lots of things like that. So your role as a psychologist is, I mean, it could be really anything.
We'll move on from Dublin after this, but another one I wanted to ask you about was Dean Rock. You know, arguably the greatest free taker we've seen in the game. The 2017 final, when he hits that the game winning free, comes to mind when you think about him. But what was he like to work with? And then was there different practices? I'm just conscious there might be players who take frees listen to this. Was there different practices you were able to put into place with him, or that he would have been asking you about in terms of breathing or calming the mind when he was stepping over a pressure free in a really big game?
I can't really, and I don't really want to talk specifics, Kevin.
Yeah.
I know you'll understand that, so I'm not going to be specific to Dean Rock, or any other athlete. But like Dean would have been trained the same as everybody was trained for the demands of the sport, and he's a really intelligent fella, and a really talented footballer. So he took everything on board. He did all of the work that was asked of him, and all the rest of the boys did as well. And you know, there are certain, I suppose, routines that do help, in terms of free kicking and things like that. A lot of routines. I'd work with a lot of routines in golf, and it's a case of the routine has to be both technical and mental. So you have your your technical work in your routine, and then you almost have to layer it with the psychology, with the psychological skills that you need in terms of selecting your shot, committing to your shot, looking at your target, making sure that your physiology is relaxed and calm. There's certain conditions where we would say, okay, well, you're not going to kick a ball straight away without first checking in on yourself and seeing, well, am I calm? Am I operating from my prefrontal cortex, or has the limbic system taken over, and am I feeling that pressure and stress and pressure? So there are definitely some cues that you'd be using in terms of those routines.
Yeah. And I seen a couple of weeks ago, and again, you don't have to talk in the context of court, but it can be more widely. But
Mm,
you put up a post on social media around their second half collapse against Galway, and
mm,
you were sort of touching on, people would have felt that it kind of mirrored the All-Ireland final the previous year,
mm,
where
mm,
in the second half just everything went wrong for them, and you were speaking about how it's important that a team actually addresses that and not
mm.
just kind of move on and say we moved on as a team, and then the following year, when it starts happening again, it can just spread through the team again. Like if you were involved with a team that, and this happens, around the country every season in loads of different sports where a team has a collapse, what would you recommend? What are the things that a team should sort of address or look at, so when it comes to the following season, that the same thing doesn't sort of happen again?
How much you paid me for this information, Kevin? Listen, I suppose the first thing to say is yes, I did an article on the Cork performance, and I suppose it's important to say that I have no insight into the Cork dressing room or the Cork environment. So you don't know what's going on. All I was doing was kind of looking at from an observer point of view and looking at, well, what does the research tell us about what transpired ultimately? So I mean, the research is telling us that yes, it is defined as a collective team collapse. And there is a researcher, Vanessa Wergan, in I think she's down in Australia. She did a lot of really good work on this. So the patterns, we were able to identify the patterns, and the patterns are that, when a team. So I suppose, to talk about the collapse, first of all, it's a sudden and extreme drop in performance where multiple players across the team in the same game start to underperform. So there is like a contagion that spreads, and it's very hard to kind of to get it back once it kind of starts to happen. But a couple of things are key. You can see that there are momentum shifts. And when there is a momentum shift and when the opposition is probably going really well, a threat response begins to set in with uh, a player or a few players. They start to panic a small bit. That emotional contagion takes place, and then lots of the other players will look at that panic and they'll start to panic. So it's a really slippery slope. Um, the mindset of the players will normally turn into kind of like an outcome mindset where they're beginning now to chase the game. And in chasing the game, they start to force shots, take shots, make decisions, poor decisions, take shots that they'd never usually take. Um, there's compounding of errors. That and the more compounding of errors you have, obviously, the more confidence you're losing as a playing group, and the more that momentum is shifting towards the opposition. Um, the coordination, the collective coordination in the group is gone. There's no leadership. The communication is gone. So all of those things are in the research that identify a collective collapse. Okay. And I suppose the notable thing is collapse happens to the best teams. The most talented teams have the ability to collapse. So it's not that the team necessarily are mentally weak or don't care or aren't courageous or brave enough. Again, like, we don't know what's going on in that setup, that how that sort of performance transpired. But if I was reviewing it and we were going into the next season, well, what I'd be saying is, okay, let's review it. Let's not blame. Let's not, point fingers. Let's use it as an opportunity to learn. Because, and I say to my athletes all the time, the adversities that you face and the setbacks and the challenges, they're all gifts if you're willing to see them like that. Because in within that adversity is definitely a growth piece. There's definitely a piece where I can get better from this. Because had it not happened, we wouldn't be having these conversations, right? So a debrief would happen. We would look at, um, you know, the self-talk in the team wouldn't be around, let's make sure this doesn't happen again. So it wouldn't be anything like that. It would be more a case of, okay, let's look at the behaviors of what happened in that second half. Let's look at what the triggers were. Let's look at how we responded. And there's our learning. So then what I would do with the players then is maybe go, okay, well, what is our relationship with pressure? What's your relationship with pressure? What's yours and yours and yours? And then what is our relationship collectively? You have to look at game management. You have to have strategies for when momentum changes. You can't leave that stuff to chance because it happens in every game. Why would you not be prepared for that? So being prepared for the bad calls, the opposition purple patch, the whatever else happens within the game, so that you have a strategy. And when you have a strategy, you feel prepared. And that sense of preparation gives you that confidence and that sense of control rather than trying to make it up when you're in the thick of battle. Right. So it is about it's about preparation, really. It's about learning, you know, what pressure does to me and me taking responsibility for that as a player. And then game management strategies put in so that that can often come from the coaches. Um, and it's a collective effort to try and just pinpoint, okay, we've an issue dealing with pressure and dealing with momentum. Let's go after that this year. And let's see if we can do better at that, but there's no guarantees.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's interesting. Though, yeah, you just kind of you have to think about it beforehand. You can't just come back around and hope it doesn't happen again the following season.
No, 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 because when you're in this collective collapse, your whole system is being dictated by the limbic system. So your prefrontal cortex is completely shut down. The CEO is offline. You cannot make a good decision. You cannot think straight. Your attention is disrupted. You know, your skills will break down under that sort of pressure. So you have nothing tangible from a brain point of view to be able to get yourself out of it. Because the limbic system is gone into survival mode and it just wants you off that pitch as quickly as possible and safe. So you're working against the biology um, when you're not prepared for it.
100%. Another thing you sort of mentioned, and again, we could just talk generally on this, but it was around, say, the role of performance coaches in county setups or people who are non-qualified as sports psychologists, almost taking that role in setups.
Mm,
And again, it's not against the people who are doing that, but
mm,
what's your sort of thoughts around that? Like, are there dangers there? The players might actually see them as a qualified sports psychologist,
mm.
but well, maybe they're actually not.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of dangers there, Kevin. And, I think, first of all, it's important to say that the work that we do, my profession, is absolutely fascinating. I don't think there's anybody in sport that wouldn't like to know everything about sports psychology and how the mind of an athlete works and and what are the ingredients of high performance and success and optimizing human potential. I mean, it is just a fascinating area. So I understand people wanting to be involved and being really interested in it. But I suppose the downside of that is not everybody interested in it is competent in it, you know? And I think from a traditional point of view, Ireland is about 10 years behind, the UK in terms of regulating this whole area and certainly the rest of the world. And traditionally, it has been the people that had the interest that started working with our high performers 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. The only thing is we're continuing that culture when the profession has evolved. So I think, at the moment there's a couple of there's nuance there in terms of the people that are going into these teams doing these roles, and that is from, the likes of your performance gurus, to former athletes, to part qualified psychologists. So, there's only a handful of us that are fully qualified, fully trained, fully registered, and fully regulated. So that's a huge gap in the market, and the demand is huge, but the supply isn't great. So I think what we need to do, and it's the onus is on us as the elders in the profession, is to create the pathway for young graduates that are passionate and interested in a career in sports psychology to help them train, to give them the applied skills that they need to do their job with competence and with ethical boundaries and accountability, which is not there at the moment, unfortunately, because like part qualified people, and by that I mean there's lots of and perhaps they're skilled practitioners, but they're maybe have a master's in sports psychology, which, listen, to be fair, it's an academic qualification. You're taught the theories of psychology and things like that, but you're not taught how to go into a team and apply any of that learning to real people with real problems, with real dynamic and complex brains and all the rest of it. Um, and that's where the deficit is. The deficit is transferring what I know from a book into how do I practice this? Because sports psychology is absolutely a science, But I think to be an applied practitioner, you need to be an artist. So um, the gap in Ireland is that there is no training. So these people are coming out of postgraduate courses, and listen, they're on to me every day of the week, and I love chatting to them, and they're very enthusiastic, and they love this, they love sport, and they love sports psychology. There's just no place for them. So um, at the moment, Coru is regulating psychology. Sports psychology is coming under that regulation. Um, and there is an opportunity now for us to create that pathway so that we can start, um, I suppose, supplying the demand with good, competent, accountable, and insured practitioners. Because some of the downfall is, you have people going in under the umbrella of a sports psychologist. Well, first of all, there's an informed consent issue there. So if a team thinks there's a sports psychologist coming in and they're not, well, they're unlikely to know the difference, first of all. And then they might confide in you, thinking that you have ethical accountability and oversight when you don't. So they're communicating with somebody that is not answerable to anybody. You also have, things can, an athlete might come with what looks like a confidence issue, and people that aren't trained on the nuance or the complexity may see that also as a confidence issue and miss underlining mental health issues, neurodivergence, what have you. They have no referral pathway for people that are distressed. And I suppose most problematic is when you're not trained, you you're giving your opinion really based on your life, how I did it, or what I've read in a book, or what I hear some guru talking about on YouTube. Whereas when you're trained, you're not giving your opinion, you're giving evidence-based research, and you're, delivering it in a way that is relevant and specific to that individual. Um, so yeah, there's a lot of harm to it. So you're talking about competence, you're talking about scope of practice, you're talking about accountability and oversight. And also, I've heard recently that there are some part qualified people that are taking over the performance psychology program for counties. So at that point, for me, that's a red flag because you're dealing with minors. And where are the safeguarding processes? Where is the oversight? Where is the accountability? So I think NGBs and I think Gaelic Games organisations need to start looking at who they are employing, and looking, and that's what regulation will hopefully help achieve, is that they will be advised to hire people that are registered, because there is accountability there. But somebody that's going in that isn't part of a professional membership group, they've no accreditation, they have no registration or regulation, it's a free for all. They can say and do what they like and talk schnuggums.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a really good point. Just a final for you, one for you, Anne-Marie. I'm curious about, say if you were involved with a top team, a top
Mm.
intercounty team now, and you were embedded fully in every training and session in the games. What would that week look like for you in terms of what are you doing? Are you speaking individually to the players in group setting? And I know again, there's probably no one answer for this. It will change depending on what they need, but just to kind of give us an outline of what you'll be doing week on week, what would that look
Yeah,
like?
it's a lot.
Yeah.
I've been lucky. The work that I've done in intercounty has always been embedded. So I have worked really, really hard. There is no standard week. And again, there's no standard work. It depends on what you're kind of brought in to do. But from my experience, what a standard week might look like, is that you're I say up and down to training, because you could be traveling 2, 3, 4 hours maybe. So you're attending training sessions. So you're watching training on the pitch, and you're looking for behaviors. You're looking for relationships. You're looking for how communication is. You're looking at how the coaches are coaching. What language are they using? What kind of feedback are they doing? You're also at gym sessions and you're watching the crack in the gym, and you're looking at, well, who's kind of friendly with who, where's the relationships here, where's the trust, where's the cohesion. You get to kind of chat to the lads a few bit. You obviously get to talk to some of the injured lads that are kind of doing their rehab and things like that. It will involve meetings with the manager, some of the coaches. So you could be talking about managing a player that's injured. You could be managing. The psychologist doesn't get involved in selection, but you might be helping them with their selection process in terms of, well, this is what a good selection process looks like. This is what I would recommend. Um, you could read, what else could you be doing? You're obviously working one-to-one with the players. So you're doing that consultation work. You are, what else? Just
Like
trying to
match
think.
day, I suppose you'd
You're
have a
there, you're
role as
getting
well.
ready for match day. Yeah, actually you're doing you're delivering your interventions and you're delivering your workshops if needs be. You could be also helping with reviewing past matches. Personally, I love to sit in on the analysis sessions. I know I'm totally weird. But that I find that really, really useful for my work, would you believe? And I would always, my first point when I go into a team is, where's the stats guy? That's the
Really?
first link that I will always make. Give me your stats. Tell me what our metrics are. What does success look like for us? What are we measuring? So I will sit in on the analysis sessions because it's really interesting because first of all, players often dislike those sessions because there's a lot of
Yeah.
accountability in it, right? So I'm kind of seeing them. How are they taking feedback? How is the feedback given to them? How are they reflecting on doing well? How are they reflecting on things being pointed out that they're not doing well? Are the coaches pointing out on lots of the hard work that's going on off the ball? Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
So yeah, really, that's a fertile ground for me, I have to say. So I'll be in and I'll be nosying around, taking notes. It also helps me to understand the game plan as well, Kevin, and some of the language that the coaches use, so that I can use that into my sessions. So it's yeah, that's a huge part. That's what I love. And then you're on match day, so you could be meeting the day before, so you're with the players the night before. You could be running a session the night before. You're involved on match day. Um, and then rinse, repeat. Rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat for 6 months. You've no life.
Yeah, geez, I can imagine it's fairly intense
But it's
once you're actually in
brilliant.
there.
It's
Yeah.
brilliant. You wouldn't want to be anywhere else.
And
You
you get
wouldn't
to
want
know
to
them
be
so
anywhere
well,
else.
I'd say.
Hmm?
You get to know the people so well as well, the management
That's
and the
that's it
players.
as
So
well. When you're embedded, I remember I was in a team one time and they'd never had a sports psychologist embedded. There was always somebody that was just kind of floating in and out, kind of doing bits and bobs. And I remember I was in the dressing rooms, I was sit down having dinner, I was in the gym, I was in the stats, and I remember it came back to me that one of the players was like, "Why is she always here?" They were just not used to it, but they have to get used to being there. You have to be there so that they understand that this isn't unusual. I am just like your S&C coach.
yeah,
I am training your mind. I am training, your mindset, your psychology, the culture, the environment, all of these things. So you just look at me like one of the S&C lads. And that's really important. And then the more you're there, obviously, the more rapport you build up, and you can start having the crack, and you know, and when that happens, that's magic. And I
yeah,
suppose it sounds like that's very much the case with the Limerick hurlers and Caroline at the moment. She seems to have developed a really, really strong bond with the players, and that's just magic. That's magic stuff for any sports. Like, so it's a trust game. It's a relationship game. So that's fundamental.
yeah. No, that's really interesting. That was an absolutely fascinating chat. I know you don't do many of these interviews, so
No.
I really appreciate you giving your time there. I think you've given some unreal insights there into the teams and kind of your practices and how you do things as well. So
Brilliant.
thanks very much for coming on. And yeah, best of luck with everything, all the clubs
You
you're
are
involved in
so
now over the
welcome.
next few weeks.
No, it's my pleasure, Kevin, and I might come on again. Who knows?
indulge in that.
Yeah.
Thanks very
So
much.
yeah, thanks very much.